In the last 72 hours, something happened over Iranian airspace that military analysts are still struggling to fully process. A bomber that was designed before the first satellite ever left Earth's atmosphere. A bomber that took its maiden flight when Dwight D. Eisenhower was still in his first term as president. A bomber built when Iran itself was still a kingdom under a pro-American Shah. Just executed the single most devastating sustained bombing campaign the Middle East has witnessed in the 21st century. The B-52 Stratofortress, a machine born in the early 1950s, has just done something so far beyond what anyone expected that even the Pentagon's own analysts are calling it a textbook redefinition of what air power can accomplish in the modern era. And what it has accomplished inside Iran is not just devastating. It is, by every measurable military metric, irreversible. Iran's missile empire, the foundation of everything its regime built its regional power upon, has been reduced to smoldering craters and twisted metal. We are going to walk you through exactly what the B-52 just did, why it has changed the entire equation of this war, and why the word more does not even begin to describe what is coming for what remains of Iran's military structure. Stay with us, because the second half of this video contains a development so significant that it has Iran's new leadership in a state of complete strategic paralysis. Well, get there. First, let's talk about what just happened. The week leading up to March 9th was already one of the most intense periods of aerial bombardment Iran had ever experienced. America's stealth assets, the B-2 Spirit and the F-22 and F-35 fighter jets that the US Air Force used in the opening phase of this conflict, had already gutted Iran's integrated air defense network. According to the war zone, roughly 80% of Iran's surface-to-air missile systems had been destroyed or rendered combat ineffective before the B-52s ever entered the picture in a significant way. The E-18G Growlers, the US Navy's premier electronic warfare aircraft, had carved silent electronic corridors through what remained of Iran's radar and communications infrastructure. What all of that created, as Max Afterburner has detailed in his analysis of the March 9th strikes, was an open sky above Iran. Not completely open, not without risk, but open enough for something that was never supposed to fly this deep into a contested environment to do exactly that. Open enough for the B-52. The first wave of Stratofortresses that the US deployed against Iran flew directly from bases inside the United States, conducting round trips of over 30 hours to deliver AGM-158 joint air-to-surface standoff missiles, the JASM, deep into Iranian territory. The JASM itself is a stealthy cruise missile, meaning that even though the B-52 that launched it is anything but stealthy, the missile travels its final miles to the target completely undetected by whatever radar systems Iran still had operational. That first wave hit Iran's missile infrastructure with surgical precision from a distance, from outside Iranian airspace, in some cases using forward position bases. According to defense industry analysis, the distance from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri to Iranian targets sits at approximately 11,000 kilometers, pushing the outer edge of the B-52's unrefueled range of just over 14,000 kilometers, or 8,800 miles. Every mile of that matters when you are running a sustained bombing campaign, and that is precisely why what happened next changed everything. With Iran's air defenses practically neutralized, the calculus for the B-52 shifted in a way that no Iranian military planner had prepared for. The bomber stopped firing from distance. It started flying in. According to Afterburner's reporting, B-52 crews began releasing their cruise missiles from standoff range and then continuing their flight path directly into Iranian airspace, following up with joint direct attack munitions, the JDAM, 2,000-pound bombs guided by GPS to their targets with a margin of error measured in feet. A single B-52 carries a payload of 70,000 pounds. With 2,000-pound JDAM, that translates to 35 devastating precision strikes per aircraft per sortie. 35 individual impacts, piplani, per mission. Iran's underground missile storage tunnels, its production facilities, its mobile launchers caught in transit between bases, all of it has been on the receiving end of that arithmetic every single day. The war zone confirmed that in the 72 hours leading to March 9th alone, American B-52s struck 200 separate targets inside Iran. 200. In 3 days. That is a pace of destruction that no air force in history has sustained against a country of Iran's size in the modern era, and it shows absolutely no sign of slowing down. The results on the ground inside Iran are catastrophic for the regime's military doctrine. Israel's military intelligence, cited by I-24 News, assessed that approximately 70% of Iran's operational ballistic missile launchers had been destroyed or put permanently out of commission by the time the March 9th strikes concluded. Iran managed to salvage a portion of its damaged launchers, moving them into underground hardened facilities, but those facilities are now being systematically targeted with bunker-busting munitions, specifically designed to penetrate reinforced concrete. The Wall Street Journal added critical context to this picture, reporting that Iran's missile launch rate had collapsed by 90% compared to the opening day of the conflict. On day one, Iran attempted a saturation strategy, firing large volleys of ballistic missiles in the hope that sheer volume would overwhelm Israeli and American missile defense systems. By March 6th, that saturation strategy had devolved into isolated sporadic launches, what the journal described as risky potshots, because Iran simply no longer has enough functioning launchers or accessible stockpiles to sustain anything resembling coordinated fire. The B-52 did that. The bomber, conceived in the Eisenhower era, dismantled the centerpiece of Iran's 21st century military doctrine in less than 2 weeks. This is the military show. If you have not subscribed yet, this is the moment to hit that button and never miss a development in the Iran war as it unfolds in real time. Now, here is where this story takes a turn that Iran's new supreme leader is entirely unprepared for. And this is the development we mentioned at the top of this video. Pay very close attention because this changes the trajectory of everything that follows. The United Kingdom has opened RAF Fairford to American bomber operations, and Diego Garcia, the British-administered base in the Indian Ocean, is expected to follow. 3 B-52s arrived at RAF Fairford from Minot Air Force Base in North Dakota as of March 9th, according to the War Zone, and those bombers represent far more than a simple repositioning of assets. They represent a fundamental shift in the geometric reality of this war for Iran. Here is why that matters, in terms that cannot be argued with. The distance from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri to Iranian targets is approximately 11,000 kilometers. The distance from RAF Fairford in the United Kingdom to those same targets is 4,500 kilometers. That is less than half the distance, less than half the flight time, less than half the aerial refueling requirements, and, most critically for Iran, more than double the sortie rate that America's B-52 fleet can now generate against Iranian territory. The BBC has confirmed that the US Air Force's 501st Combat Support Wing has maintained a long-standing operational presence at RAF Fairford, meaning no infrastructure build-up is required. The maintenance teams, the fuel, the ground support systems, all of it is already in place. American cargo aircraft are already being tracked, heading toward the base, with ammunition resupply loads to keep the bombers cycling through their strike packages without pause. What this means in practical terms is that the campaign Iran has already been struggling to survive just got significantly more intense. A B-52 departing RAF Fairford on a strike mission into Iran still has over 3,000 miles of range remaining in its fuel tanks after completing a full round trip, according to defense industry calculations. These bombers are not being pushed to their limits. They are operating well within their comfort zone, which means they can fly more frequently, carry heavier loads, and return to base faster for rearming. For Iran, there is no longer any window of relief between strikes. There is no longer any meaningful gap in which damaged infrastructure can be assessed, partially repaired, or relocated. The pace of destruction has outrun the pace at which any military organization on Earth could respond. And adding another layer of precision to this already overwhelming campaign is the intelligence network that the B-52s are now operating within. As Afterburner has detailed, Predator drones are conducting real-time intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance missions ahead of each B-52 strike package. With a range of 770 miles and a ceiling of 25,000 feet, well above most of Iran's remaining point defense systems, the Predators are feeding the B-52 crews a continuous live picture of what has been hit, what needs to be hit next, and where any residual Iranian air defense assets might be lurking. MQ-9 Reapers and RQ-4 Global Hawks are layering additional sensor data on top of that, giving the B-52 pilots what Afterburner described as a real-time targeting feed that updates continuously throughout each mission. The result is not just a bombing campaign. It is a self-correcting, continuously adapting destruction machine that is methodically erasing Iran's missile capability from the map one strike at a time. The strategic logic behind targeting Iran's production facilities alongside its existing launchers and stockpiles is something that deserves full attention, because it is arguably the most consequential dimension of what the B-52 campaign has accomplished. According to Israeli military intelligence assessments, Iran had been aggressively accelerating its ballistic missile production in recent months, with a stated internal goal of building a stockpile of 8,000 ballistic missiles by the year 2027. 8,000 missiles would have given Iran the kind of overwhelming numerical advantage in any future conflict that even the most advanced missile defense systems would struggle to fully absorb. The B-52 has made that goal not just unachievable, but structurally impossible. By destroying the production lines, the component supply chains, the specialized engineering facilities, and the trained personnel infrastructure that Iran's missile manufacturing program depended upon, the United States has not simply reduced Iran's current missile count. It has set Iran's missile program back by a decade or more. Every launch that Iran's military attempts from this point forward draws down a stockpile that is no longer being replenished at any meaningful rate. Iran is now fighting a war of diminishing ammunition against an enemy that has an essentially unlimited resupply chain backed by the full industrial capacity of the United States of America. None of this is happening by accident, and none of it is improvised. What the United States is executing inside Iran right now is the most refined application of the air superiority doctrine that American military strategists have spent decades building, testing, and refining across every conflict from Desert Storm to the opening days of Operation Iraqi Freedom. The sequence is precise and deliberate. First, stealth assets eliminate the air defense network, creating the conditions for everything that follows. Second, electronic warfare platforms like the EA-18G Growler suppress and blind whatever radar systems survive the initial stealth strikes, carving out safe corridors through the electromagnetic spectrum as well as through physical airspace. Third, and this is the phase Iran is now fully submerged in, the heavies come in. The B-52s, the workhorses, the aircraft that can carry more destruction per sortie than almost any other platform in the American arsenal, move in and begin the systematic, methodical, relentless process of turning an enemy's military infrastructure into rubble. Afterburner summarized the doctrine precisely: suppress air defenses first with stealth, create the silent corridors, and then bring in the heavies for sustained pressure. Iran assumed this doctrine would never be fully applied against it because it believed its missile program was the ultimate deterrent. That assumption has been proven catastrophically wrong, and every B-52 sortie departing RAF Fairford reinforces that proof with another 2,000 pounds of ordnance delivered precisely on target. The aircraft carriers positioned in and around the Persian Gulf are reinforcing that lesson every single day. Their flight decks cycling F-18s and F-35CS through strike packages that complement what the B-52s are doing from altitude. Iran's entire defensive architecture was built around the idea that the cost of attacking it would be too high for any adversary to sustain. What has been demonstrated in the last 2 weeks is that the United States built an arsenal specifically capable of making that cost acceptable, and it has deployed that arsenal without hesitation or restraint. And then there is the political dimension, which is perhaps the most telling indicator of where this is all headed. On March 9th, President Trump was asked directly when he believed the war would end. His response, cited by multiple outlets, was that the United States had already eliminated 2 levels of Iran's leadership structure and that America was achieving major strides toward completing its military objective. That is not the language of a president preparing to negotiate. That is the language of a commander-in-chief overseeing the final stages of a campaign designed to produce an outcome, not a ceasefire. Iran's appointment of Mojtaba Khamenei, the son of the former supreme leader Ali Khamenei, as its new supreme leader has not improved that calculus in any way. As Al Jazeera reported, Trump moved quickly to dismiss that appointment and made clear in language that left no ambiguity whatsoever that he intends to be involved in determining what Iran's post-war leadership structure looks like. The new Khamenei has been handed the leadership of a country whose military has been systematically dismantled in under 2 weeks. He commands an air force that cannot fly, a missile force that cannot fire, an air defense network that cannot defend. And now, with RAF Fairford in play, and Diego Garcia likely to follow, he faces a bomber fleet that is closer to Iranian territory than at any point since this war began, flying more sorties than before, hitting more targets than before, with greater precision than before. The B-52 that was built before the Islamic Republic of Iran even existed is now the primary instrument of that republic's military destruction. The regime that spent 4 decades building its missile empire as the ultimate guarantor of its survival has watched that empire dissolve in real time under the wings of a 60-year-old bomber that refuses to be replaced, refuses to be stopped, and by every indication coming out of Washington right now, refuses to go home until the job is finished.